trying to make sure I say Trend Hunter every time and get it right. So Jeremy is an author and the chief trend hunter at trendhunter.com. He is relentless in his mission to find better, faster ideas. He founded Trend Hunter because deep down he wanted to be an entrepreneur, but never really found his own business idea. So he went out and ironically helped other people find their business ideas, and finally one morning, in the wee hours of the morning, Jeremy, is that what it was? Wee hours of the morning, he came up with the idea, and Trend Hunter was formed. A couple of billion page views later, it's clear that the serving of Trend Hunter community is his calling. As you can see, he brought his book with him today, and Jeremy, just like my mother used to say, I hope you bought enough for everybody. But without any further ado, let's get Jeremy up here so we can do his keynote.
Thank you, sir.
You got it.
I'm excited to talk to you today about a deeper dive into my book on how to win the future. And actually, 50 of the brands at this event, I believe, somewhere in that range, are actually already clients of ours. So for me, this is going to feel a little bit more like home. So I'm going to kick it off and dive right in. We're experiencing history's highest rate of change, disruption, ambition, and opportunity. If you want to create in media, there's never been a better time to explore, but the catch is companies are getting disrupted at a pace faster than ever before. 52% of the Fortune 500s from the year 2000 are gone. Somehow, people continue to miss digital disruption, particularly in media. But it's never been a more exciting time to test new ideas, try new things, experiment, and ultimately find your new level. We have robotic construction, autonomous driving cars, augmented reality in sports, mind-controlled HTC brain readers, thought-controlled prosthetic devices, smart cities, and effectively a completely different way of looking at humanity's potential, which so often draws itself back to the people in this room and the things you're actually doing in media. So I'm going to kick it off with a very simple question. What great ideas are so close within your grasp? Effectively, you're much closer to new opportunity than you think. And I don't know what that is for any of you in this room. That might be a new product, a new service, a different way of thinking about things. But the reality is that there are a series of neurological blockers which prevent you from actually realizing your full potential. And I'm going to prove to you how these blockers add up to a 93% reduction in creative potential. If I could show you how to get around that, I could take you to your next level. But I figured we could do this in a couple ways. It's the Media Insight Conference. You came here to Miami to have a little bit of fun, but I don't know. We're going to figure out if you want that or not. So I need to be loud and rowdy on a couple of these things. Are you guys here to have a little bit of fun? Okay, then do you want to do a business case or play a game? All right, business case, solid. You guys made your vote. All right, how many people remember this little bastard? Yeah, Clippy pops up, your whole computer goes, slows down, and then always there's handy advice like, hi, it looks like you're trying to write a passive-aggressive letter to your neighbor. Can I help? And then everything goes all caps. Okay, my first game is related to Clippy. I want to see what we can do with a paperclip. I don't want to do this live. So what can we do with a paperclip? Shout it if you know. Pardon me? Ain't Christmas ornaments. Nobody ever says clip paper. I like that. But, okay, ornaments. That's one. Pick a lock, devious. Both of you said that. Both of you should meet up and rob somebody. That's cool. Two. Take a SIM card out. You're going to say CD-ROM, and then we judge you because it's the Media Insight for, okay. Reset a device. Four. It's similar, but I'll give it to you. What else can you do? Trade it. Five. What'd you say? Toothpick. Oh, my God. That's embarrassing. What's your name? Here, let's pull that out. Can someone please get her a toothbrush? What? Now she's covering her name tag. She will not let that out. All right, fine. We're at 5 ideas. Keep going. Roast marshmallows. You're saying something jeweled? Ear scratcher, close to the toothbrush. I won't say your name, but I know where you're at. Hair clip. Keep going. Earring, 8. Buy your wife something nicer. Weapon, 9. Back to the weapon. Went from being nice to the wife. It's Valentine's Day. Weapon, screw it. Scratcher, 10. Okay, so here's the thing. You guys are doing pretty good. The average group of adults can get about 8 ideas. You just beat them by 25%. Give yourself a round of applause. The teeny tiny little catch is that the average group of kindergarten kids can get to 200. Minor detail. I wanted to test this, so I put my little niece to work, and here's my niece, Allie, at age 6, giving you a run for her money. Here's Allie.
I have a question for you. What can you do with a paperclip?
It can be a needle, it can be a sailboat, it can be a nail, a fireman pole, whether it's a builder and that's a drill.
How do you come up with so many ideas?
Think, and then you can make these stuff. But it's still more ways to do this.
Any other ways that I could be creative like you?
You think in your brain and you close your eyes and you think what it could be, and also you can watch documentaries to find out if that's true or not.
Give it up for my niece, Allie, everybody.
That was pretty good.
If we're talking about disruption, that is who will disrupt me as a keynote speaker, but it's fine. She's in the family. Keep it all in. Here's the thing. Allie's illustrated our first trap, which is neurological shortcuts. This is one of the things that blocks you from your creative potential. The way that I would illustrate what you just saw is that over time, all of us do become more intelligent. Got it. We like that. But what we don't want to admit is that we lose our raw creativity. By math, in that little example, we lost 95% of the ideas that Allie had. And in a business context and a media context, with any given problem, you could come up with 200 solutions. The issue is that our brain has a series of shortcuts to reduce neural complexity, and those reduce the number of suggestions we'll come up with. But here's the thing I want you to note from what we just did. It's not that your brain reduces ideas. It's more important than that. It reduces the ideas by showing you the things you've already thought of or heard before. In that example of all the paperclip uses, everybody's idea in this room was something we've seen done before, which means that the lady who keeps guarding her name tag uses it for her toothpick. That's what it means. But this is very important because it means that we're great at making split-second decisions for something like avoiding lions, but this neurological effect is terrible when it comes to innovation and change, which is where I spend my time playing. So I want to start by letting you know that an upside is that the implication is that there are great ideas well within your grasp. You absolutely already have thought of these ideas. In a year or two, you'll come up with some breakthrough, but you'll realize you had all the clues in front of you for 2 years. You know what this effect is like. My job is to try and give you a set of tactics to extract better thinking from you and your teams so you can get to some of those ideas you already have, but faster. And the way we do it, which I'll walk you through a little bit of, is we use the patterns of innovation to give you different perspectives to look at your problem so that you're more likely to extract more ideas that ultimately have the things that you're going to pursue. And as a company, our role usually is that we deep dive these using big data, AI, etc. But here's what I've had the opportunity to see my team do. There's 50 brands in media, so I think a lot of them in this room that we've done research for, about 5,000 research projects. You can see a couple there. And we've learned a bit about which ideas work and which ones don't through 250,000 pages of PowerPoint a year, if you're counting in meters and feet. I think we know we're intelligent. We get that we've lost raw creativity. What I'm going to walk you through are the tactical things you would need to do to increase the idea creation on your team. In the words of, or looking at Allie actually, in the words of her, on one hand, I was inspired to see the ideas she came up with, but on the other hand, you see a cute little girl, my business is innovation and creativity, and she's beating me? Well, that's horrible and terrifying. So what I see is a vindictive little woman trying to steal my job. Cut that from the video, please, before my sister sees. Now, if we break through and we look at the age in which your brain peaks, here's a really neat slide. You actually have creative imagination at its top potential at age 5, and that might be where Allie's at now, but the advantage I have on her is I'm better at running, lifting, and basic math. Take that, Allie. And if any of this looks a little sad to the rest of us in the room, the upshot is that we actually do get better at a lot of things related to innovation. So as we continue to age, we become better at understanding emotion, seeing other points of view, anticipating change, considering multiple possible turnouts, acknowledging uncertainty, searching for compromise, and useless vocabulary. But with what we're tasked with, which is to adapt to a rapidly changing media landscape, this is at least nice to know. The catch or takeaway is that you need actual tactics if you want to be able to harness all these new skills that you're acquiring. I'd wrap this particular part of the speech by saying we need to train our brains to be methodical about creativity because we're more intelligent, but we lost that raw creativity. A couple simple steps: reset your expectation, kill your ego, throw away your first ideas, and use things like patterns and megatrends, which we'll get into, to deep dive curiosities. If I have any slide with good takeaways, I'll let Clippy come back so that we know it's the good stuff. There's Clippy. Okay, learned behavior. Let's get back to Allie for a second. Allie loves dinosaurs more than anything else. Who has a kid here in the room? And do any kids hate dinosaurs? No, they all love dinosaurs. But I asked Allie once in part of my research, as part of being a market researcher and like having a little niece, she gets like messed over by all the experiments you do. It's fine. And I asked her, what do you actually like? Do you like dinosaurs or do you like princesses? Do you want a princess doll for Christmas? What should I get you? And she said,
T-Rexes eat princess for breakfast.
T-Rexes eat princess for breakfast. Num, 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 num. Now, Allie does not want a princess doll. She wants something different, a little bit more aggressive. And the reason I show you this story is because it clues us into a very important lesson about the day that I saw a 7-year-old girl's heart break. And if I asked you, do you want to see a 7-year-old girl's heart break? You'd be like, no, but it's like a required part of the story, so we have to watch this. So check this out.
Can you tell me why you're so sad, Alethea?
It's no more dinosaurs they can find.
There's no more dinosaurs to find? Because they're extinct?
No, in the parent house, I want to find a bone. Our bone and out of my poor bone.
Because the paleontologist found all the bones and you want to find bones? You know what, Allie?
It's terrifying because the paleontologist found all of the bones. So this brings to us a problem that one would run into if you're an uncle, or in my sister's case, a parent. Basically, you need to explain that dinosaurs don't exist, or grade 12 is going to be really effing difficult. And unfortunately, throughout a little girl's life, every time you tell her that dinosaurs don't exist, you limit her imagination. And this is the beginning of what you've seen at age 6. But as you continue your career, you will continue to have things that stop you from being able to think outside the box. And unfortunately, as leaders, you'll even be responsible for some of those as you enforce them upon your team. In the words of my client from Universal, who's Chief Strategy Officer there for the Parkside, he said, it gets worse because boardrooms are full of people who built their careers challenging ideas and showing you what's wrong. So to wrap up this trap on learned behavior, you need to create a culture that basically is open to possibility. A couple really quick wins on this one. Encourage play, stop knowing the answer, and ask questions. Assume that you are incorrect, break rules, and find ways to diversify your team. Or in the words of Allie,
Deep down, you need to find your little kid in yourself. All the little kids believe in themselves because they're little. But you, parents, do not believe in yourself. You need to find a kid in yourself, then you can believe in yourself. When you find that kid, you can do it. And go through the obstacle course to get to that kid inside your body.
in case you missed that, go through the obstacle course to find that little kid inside your body. Brilliant words by Ali Bobian, age 6. Now, we move on to the next trap, which is the idea of cultural conformity. I know a lot about how cultural conformity works because when I was a little guy, I was very cool, as you can see. And I know you're all saying, you're like, wow, that was you and you're a little guy? But Jeremy, you got that cool hair, you got damn glasses, you got that awesome sweater, right? What you wouldn't believe is that I was a nerd. Like, I know, you're like, really? I don't believe you, Jeremy, because you're thinking of Drake. And he had that hair and them glasses and that sweater. But who's the trend hunter now, Drake? 24 years ahead of my time. Actually, this picture gets better if I had my sister in, because it was the 80s, and there's that hair. Like, literally, your projector barely captures the top of my slide on this one. For, understanding media insights, that was an insight right there. But if you met me as a little guy, all I wanted to do was find a little business idea. That's all I wanted. It drove me nuts. And I had this exercise with my dad where we would go through every possible newspaper, every magazine, looking at all the sections of new stuff, flipping through to see what's new in running, fishing, golf, whatever. And we would try and see if we could make little prototypes as businesses. And this made me want to be an entrepreneur, but it also overwhelmed me because I saw opportunity everywhere. And with the people on your team and the people in your role, we're all running into the same situation right now, which is that it's so easy to find opportunities in media because everyone's become a broadcaster on an individual level, that what's happening on the teams is that we've reached a point where the act of getting inspired has become overwhelming. And in my little world, that meant I tried half a dozen little businesses. I couldn't find what was right for me, so I started coding a website where people from around the world could share business ideas. And I thought some trend hunter in Asia, or a trend hunter in Europe, or a trend hunter in Hong Kong might submit a little concept that would inspire my little, tiny little creation. And what I didn't get is that pretty soon there'd be 150 million people, and we'd be measuring billions of views, big data, AI, all that wonderful stuff to try and figure out what's next. But worded differently, my whole story is that I went from being a little business nerd trying to find my idea to someone who I think is more now dedicated to really obsessing about what is your idea and how do I help you get to something that's probably so close within your grasp. And here's the takeaway that I think is really fun with this. Actually, let's do this as a little poll. I drew that Pac-Man, by the way. I just want to let you know in PowerPoint, that keeps you up pretty late. That's not easy, but it's awesome. And it's a trademark violation, so it's good. What's more important, culture or strategy? No, it's giant Pac-Man. You can nail this one, and then we'll be all ready for the beer party afterwards. What's more important, culture or strategy? Culture. One guy's like strategy, trying to fight Eaton, just gone. So culture eats strategy for breakfast is a sign, or is a slogan that Peter Drucker used to say. Ford put it in their strategy war room. And the concept is that it doesn't matter how good your PowerPoint slides are. You might have the greatest media insight in the world, the idea on how to transform your brand, but it won't take hold if you can't figure out how to rally your company, sell your CEO, make your team want it to happen. And I love that quote. And in my first book a decade ago, I'd included it. And it really drove me, but I had a story in that first book about how monkeys emulate change if you put them in a cage and do certain experiments. What delighted me was to find out they took that same experiment and they did it with human people. So I want to show you this experiment to show you how powerful culture is when it comes to your great new ideas.
We set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
everybody was doing, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room.
That's a doctor's office, and we still comply with what's happening around us. When you introduce power and culture and everything that's happening in your own organizations, the reality is that great ideas, innovation gets squashed because of how culture eats strategy for breakfast. I wrote this book in 2007, which was good timing as far as writing a book on chaos goes. And as a result, I don't think people really heard about it too much, but it went for, on CEO Read, it was #1 for 4 months. So I started getting invited by a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs to help with their reinvention, in total about 500 of them, which was pretty cool. And so I want to walk you through some of what we learned. This is Tony Hunter, and I picked a media example for you today. This is the remarkable tale of the turnaround king. So Tony Hunter, for those that don't know the name right away, was a guy who loves Chicago craft beer, Chicago deep dish pizza, Chicago Cubs, Chicago history, Chicago. And the reason why is that when I met him, he was publisher of the Chicago Tribune. And I want to give a little bit of that context there because for him, this wasn't a job. So when I met him in the Tribune Tower and he tours me through the lobby, he makes sure that I stop to look at all of the quotes from journalists and media people of days past. He sees the Tribune not as a brand or a media company, he sees it as an institution that is a pillar of the Chicago community. And it kind of matters to him in a way that's different than the way people look at a job. Now, this is important because one day when things were going well for Tony, he was an SVP, he's a publisher, probably similar to many of the titles in this room. So I want you to put yourself in his shoes. He gets a call that changes things.
Imagine you're me in 2008. A great career with Tribune Company, 15 years, continuously moving up the ranks, record profits, things are going well when all of a sudden the financial meltdown occurs. .coms come on the scene and begin to steal share. People are running from the publishing industry, and people are wondering if there will be newspapers in the future. Staring us straight in the face is bankruptcy, layoffs, and many tough decisions. And then my phone rings, offering me the top job.
So Tony gets offered the top job to be CEO, which is a pretty big deal. Imagine that happens to you, but it's also a really big deal, kind of like a shocking big deal, because why is he getting offered that position? It seems too soon. And it's because when they bring him into the office as an SVP, they want him to declare bankruptcy, lay off his buddies, motivate who's left, shrink the paper, and sell more ads, right? Easy, right? That's kind of difficult. I liken this to being asked to captain the Titanic, but in a different scenario where they're asking you to literally drive it, not the word for a boat, but whatever, drive it into the iceberg. And destroy your beloved company, ruin your relationships with your friends of 30 years, and basically commit career suicide. After this, if people say, are you on LinkedIn? You got to delete your profile. Be like, I'm not on LinkedIn. Sorry, no, I don't know what I did before. You got to hide that. So I'm going to humanize this a little bit by showing you his interpretation to this. But I will say that Tony is a guy who loves culture. He's competitive. He never gives up. He gets offered this position. And on one hand, he loves it. But imagine doing this. Take your role now, fast forward 6 months, and you're the person signing the paper. This is the actual paper that is the declaration of bankruptcy for the brand that matters to you. That's pretty intense. It's tough to internalize until you start thinking about the next step of laying off your friends. And here was his reaction to that, to humanize it.
The first more difficult day was the day that we recognized that we'd have to right-size the company and take out anywhere between 15 and 20% of the employee base at the company. I think anytime you're a leader and you have to make those kinds of tough decisions, you really, that's a tough day because it's people. Even though the decision was right, it's still difficult because it's about people. And so that was a tough day. But I got through that by knowing I could lose all jobs or I could save quite a few. And one way to lose all jobs is to keep doing the same thing we're doing today.
So Tony's excited. He's in this new role, but he's gone through something really difficult that he doesn't really want to do. Once that's done, he gets tasked with the next part, which is, well, motivating, but how do you shrink and sell more ads? It doesn't seem to make sense. And you're being asked to write the Titanic so that it will float again. So this is when we started working with him, and we sort of did workshops ongoing and helped them with a lot of research. But the way I would describe this problem, it's something I've seen now hundreds of times, which is that you've got a problem. You're charged with how do you bring more viewers to your media brand, whatever that might be. But your CEO has 3 things they want you to do which don't necessarily align with what your job's supposed to be. Your COO has 15 ideas which seem random and operational. Your CFO is worried about stuff and they're going to block you from doing what you want. And your actual team, which is running content or whatever it might be, or insights or research, you've got a ton of ideas. The problem is you can't, in a difficult landscape, make any of this happen if you can't figure out alignment. So the type of workshops that I'd recommend doing in this scenario, which you can do yourself, but we did in this case with Tony, is imagining out what dystopia versus utopia works for your media brand. 5 years from now, if things fall apart, what would actually be the likely things that might lead that to happen? Or conversely, if things became utopic and you became the case study, seriously, what do you think that those would be? That kind of activity, if you involve everyone, allows you to co-create what your 3 priorities actually are, and from there you can actually innovate around those 3 priorities. In this case, maybe it was shrink the paper, sell more ads, and motivate the team. I'm getting super tactical on you here for a second because when we work with brands, what we find is there's motivational speakers who tell the fun, creative, fun stories, but they totally lack the next steps to help you actually make action happen on your teams. If you're brainstorming, people don't know how to do it. A simple little concept is once you've co-created with your team 3 priorities, separate out short-term tactics versus long-term versus dreamless so that people aren't randomly in different places and to actually extract better thinking from the group. In this case, we went through our different patterns, and we would use that to find different opportunities that maybe were closer within their grasp than what they thought. We're not going to go through all the patterns today. I'll just give you a couple examples. Divergence, especially in media, is that people do not want to be part of the mainstream. They want to rebel. They want something customized, personalized, status, fashionized. You'd get to a diversion opportunity by thinking about what people hate about your industry and thinking about how you could be more customized or unique from the mainstream. So Tony was being asked to shrink the paper. That's what every other newspaper was doing. What's the divergent idea from shrinking it? Making it bigger. And at first that seems like a counterintuitive thing to do, but the theory in trying it at very least was every other Chicago paper is shrinking. People need to get their info about the Cubs somewhere, and if you're the one adding this coverage, it simply doesn't exist in another place. So they did that as their first sort of divergent idea. Next pattern I'll give you is reduction. What do people actually care about? How could you be more specialized, take out layers, be fractional, do something subscription, or figure out what's really driving your viewer? A question that's a neat workshop question, if you split your work into 5 companies, which one would actually be the most valuable? Now I'm fast forwarding through these very quickly, but in this example, Tony thought about who's the actual customer. Is it the viewer, or is it the small business who advertises in the paper? And for selling revenue, in this case, for a news property, it's actually the small business. And if you go and look in any newspaper, you'll see the small businesses advertising, and their ads look like this. Buy more stuff, or we'll run out of stuff. So the ads are terrible, because that's not their game. So when Tribune was faced with this bankruptcy-like situation, what they actually did is they thought about those little guys, and then they thought about how to actually create a return for them that was much more focused on what they do. So they started a consulting firm, Tribune Services, Business Services, to actually help them create full marketing plans that would allow them to do more than just advertise, but actually have a brand and all the things you expect from a larger company. There's other patterns that we're going to skip, but I want to fast forward to, what actually happened as a result of some of this process.
I believe the role of a leader during disruptive times is to create a pathway and a reason for change. And so I would call it transforming the organization. We were in a major transformation project. And we had to go from being a newspaper company to a media and business services company that happens to publish a newspaper. And think about that in this building at the Tribune Tower, saying something like that. But making those kinds of proclamations, I think, is a big part of transforming a company. And then come behind that with a number of plans in a simplified fashion. So during our transformation, we really did 5 things extremely well. First and foremost, we simplified the plan and aligned the interests of our employees. Second, we spent a significant amount of time on employee engagement and communication. Third, we put the customer at the forefront of all of our decisions. Fourth, we invested resources against the new opportunities identified. And last, we forced a discussion of competing alternatives. And one good example of how that paid dividends was, instead of cutting the content in our product like everyone else was doing, we forced a discussion of what would happen if we added more content and asked people to pay more for it. And lo and behold, that plan, which was against the grain of the entire industry, ended up creating almost $10 million of incremental profit.
So in summary, by forcing yourself to look at your problem from different perspectives, instead of just innovating out of gut instinct like we did in the first paperclip exercise, you can actually put your team through a method which will allow them to find ideas that were probably within their grasp, and of course, they get overlooked because of all the pressures of being in a big company. Now, in Tony's case, in addition to just the workshops, what we did that was kind of fun is he turned them into hackathons, where after doing your creative workshop, I'm sure you've all run different workshops in different ways, what would happen is people had a couple days to turn their best ideas into 5-slide pitch decks. They would pitch those decks in front of the leadership team, and the best ideas would win some prize. I've done this with banks where the prize was $10,000. I've done this in cases where, in this case, it was just a dinner, and then it was sort of funny because at the Tribune, they're like, we don't want to do it for a dinner. This is our job. So it's like, okay, there's no more prize. But the point is they actually wanted to convey to people working on the ideas that they're willing to action them, which is an important little step in making innovation feel real and happen. In the end, Tribune went from bankruptcy to being the most profitable news organization in America in about 4 or 5 years. And if we want to summarize Tony's points there for you, in order to fight this cultural conformity trap, you want to inspire a culture of action. And for Tony, that meant simplify the plan. These are his words again, not mine. Engage your team, put the customer first, invest in new opportunity, and force the discussion of competing alternatives. This ends cultural conformity and brings me to the traps of success. Now, I don't have time to do this in more depth, but I'll give you a link at the end of my other keynote. It's my top one online, and it's definitely in the book that we have about 100 of for those at the end that year. But the idea is that after 10,000 years of evolution as farmers, once you find your field of opportunity, that thing your brand or you professionally are good at, you are pre-wired to repeat and optimize whatever led to last year's harvest. For 1,000,000 years, we were hunters, nomadic, and we had to keep on looking for that next meal, and we knew how to adapt. But the day we planted the first seed, we, for the first time, could settle. And when we could settle, we established organizations, hierarchies, rules, status quo, all these things to protect what was already working. Quick examples, kind of related to media. Smith Corona invented the laptop word processor, but decided to abandon their joint venture on it, and instead they went to focus on their core customers, Little did they know, 3 years after that decision, they would be declaring bankruptcy, and their joint venture partner Acer would become the second largest PC maker in the world. I interviewed that guy at Kodak. He loved inventing the digital camera in 1975, but they didn't fully exploit it because they were too busy trying to defeat Fuji and harvest their lucrative business in chemical photography. BlackBerry is a Canadian example, and therefore I don't wish to attract any negative attention to my people, so I'll skip it. BlackBerry was so obsessed with the business marketplace and their stronghold and harvesting that they could never assume their knockout punch would come from a goofy consumer phone that people used to watch media and listen to music. Blockbuster Video seems almost foreign to us, but actually Blockbuster was founded by a database expert. And at the time, if you wanted to know about media insight, nobody in the world knew more about media preferences than Blockbuster. Way more insight than the Hollywood studios, because every store had inventories regionally contextualized to the people in the neighborhood. It meant when they decided to start pioneering online video, they caught up to Netflix in just 6 months. Netflix panicked and gave them 3 chances to buy all of Netflix for $50 million. Board of directors got distracted by it, didn't like it, fired the CEO, brought a new CEO from 7-Eleven and said, you know where we make our money? Not from the ticket prices, by selling candy. New CEO, please return us to retail greatness, fire the online media team, and stop talking to Netflix. You make like one bad decision. And Britannica was approached by Bill Gates to digitize. They didn't want to capital or cannibalize their $2,000 collections of leather-bound books. So he bought Funk and Wagnalls and turned it into Encarta with some pictures and became the greatest commercially selling encyclopedia of all time. But even Bill Gates did that in a way where, if you want to think about the time, it was 1995. Launching Encarta was a chess piece in media, because it transformed the computer from a device that was for nerds to a place for families to connect and learn together. So this chess piece allowed Bill to go from a billionaire to being a tens of billionaire. But even so, when you could have put this content online for free, he didn't want to because he couldn't cannibalize this thing that had been so important for him. So a bunch of amateurs get together, they create Wikipedia, and it becomes the 5th most popular website in the world, excluding pornography and AshleyMadison.com. Hey, if you're laughing, it's because you're on it. That's a second joke. All right, so we repeat whatever led to last year's harvest, we farm. I'm going to give you a link at the end where you can actually see how much for free. You can take our little assessment, join about 20,000 people who've done it, and you can see how much these traps maybe impact you. And if you forward it to your team, or if you're in one of the 50 media brands we work with, we can compare you to your team, and you can use that to sort of, get leverage in selling your ideas or recognize how to sort of push harder. But in doing the survey, I'll show you some interesting things we've learned in this wonderful world of media. So with about 50 brands that we're working with, a lot of them in this room, this is some of the statistical work that we've seen. 26% don't believe their company has a strong innovation plan. 27% don't think they have enough time to pursue their ideas. 17% don't share ideas with their managers. 19% don't feel innovative ideas are encouraged at their company. And 22% don't even know who's responsible for innovation. Those are stats from your world. And I show them to you, and I'm willing to help you figure out how those stats play out in your own team, because they're generally sort of shocking, because those things are actionable by giving people a voice, asking for their ideas, having little monthly or quarterly sessions where people can suggest ideas. But inevitably what we find is people are so busy with work that although we prioritize innovation and insight, we don't actually give the people enough time or ask them to suggest their ideas. So with that said, be curious, be insatiable, be willing to destroy. Do you like, we're at a media conference, I see the camera, I gotta like hit that for it. Okay, or in Allie's words, she's gonna nail this better than me, she'll summarize it for you.
You can achieve your dreams, go do it, and make yourself happy, and I'll be happy for you.
Pretty cute, right? Tearjerker. Okay, this wraps up Traps of Success and brings me to my favorite part, particularly with media, which is all about linear thinking. This next part is something that I've had the opportunity to do as a workshop, full-day workshops with CEO of Sony, the chairwoman of Fox, CNBC's top 150, and I'm going to walk you through some really cool things about getting people on your company to internalize the pace of change. The biggest thing that blocks media companies from adapting is forgetting how much the world's actually changed. So here's how I do it. First off, a little bit of shock to get the people on your team to pay attention. 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from 2000 are gone. In 10 years, 40% will fall off that list. In some ways, that means half of the companies in this room will be acquired by another or fail or be disrupted. That should wake people up, but how I like to think about it is that we're all really good at thinking about what next year will bring us. We're actually really good at that. That's not a problem. The issue is when you get to 3 to 5 years out, we become really terrible in that time frame. And in order to help that become real, if I'm working with a media CEO, what we do is we go through how did their world look like in the past versus now versus the future. Like literally 10 or 15 years ago, people would find the movie they want to watch by looking at the paper, figure out the reviews, call up the theater on the touch-tone phone, listen to the answering machine, decide that they want to bring a friend, not be able to call a friend because the friend is like not got a mobile phone because no one had a mobile phone then use a paper map to get to the theater, show up and it's sold out. Like that's the old world. So to internalize this idea, first a little quote, okay, Bill Gates says business will change more in the next 10 years, the last 50. Okay, you got it. Let's do it more fun. I want to show you how this actually plays out. If you could know how the pace of change worked for your company, you'd be wiser, better, and more likely to convince your teams that now is the time for action. So what we did at Trend Hunter is we compared a variety of stats: world population, internet user, Moore's law, poverty, education, literacy, democracy, vaccination, child mortality, etc. And what you start to get are the intervals of change. As a quick example, let's just take literacy. Literacy goes from 20% to 40% over a period of 50 years. But the next 20% gets achieved in just 40 years. It goes faster and faster and faster. And this is the sort of concept that could allow you to realize we're not in a faster-paced world, we're in an accelerating world, and that's different, and people aren't prepared for it. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to do this with my grandpa, my mom, and her nerdy son. Don't forget though, Drake. Okay? All right. Let's move on. So my grandpa was in the 1900s. They had a very different life than us. He was a scientist, and so that means he was into cutting-edge stuff like all of us in this room, but literally he went to school on a horse. They had to use books when it comes to a media insight conference because that's all people had for fun. It was terrible. And they had to go camping, but it wasn't like the camping. Basically, actually, I'd even reframe it like this. 1900s for everyone was like camping, except without the inflatable air mattresses, solar panel roofs, and the Wi-Fi. It was terrible. But in his time frame of his career, in his 50 years, he sees us go from paper to magazines, televisions, from horses to car and commercial air travel, and all the good stuff starts happening. That's one unit of time. The next unit of time is my mom's life. She sees the total decline of automotive design, style, JT, come on. But we get the boombox. How many had a Discman? Anyone have a Discman in here? Yeah, right? You're listening to it like, I wish everyone in the world could hear this song right now because MC Hammer's the best. And we get the computer. Actually, if you look in 1950, when my mom was born, at the number of people that had televisions, and then compare it to the number that had Nintendos, you would see that more people had Nintendos in 1990 than all those that had televisions in 1950. And if that sounds weird and made up, it's because I did make it up. But then when I looked it up, I found out that I was true. So we went from 100,000 TVs in 1950 to 60 million Nintendos. The only part about that research that I really didn't like was this picture, because that mom is way more supportive than my mom was about Nintendo playing. My mom actually made me sell all my Violet Nintendo games, which was bad, but I hid one from her. I hid Contra, because that was really good, and I still turned out okay. And so I was so okay, in fact, she allowed me to go to my very first concert, which was MC Hammer. And after MC Hammer's concert, a riot broke out, but not one that made people and culture better. It was one where it was Teenage Misfits hyped up on Hammer. Like that guy. And I could show you the pictures, but I didn't have my camera, my recorder, and we didn't have a phone even to call my grandpa to come pick us up. That was what it looked like in 1990. Actually, here's footage from the riot.
You can't touch this.
It's not really the riot. But then let's jump, and I want to show you this interval, and I'll zip through these really quick. From 1990 to 2005, we get phones, we get iPods, electric cars, style becomes better, we get Dubai, Shanghai, and this. Remember that? Mom, get off the computer. I need it. I got off the phone. I'm dialing in. And then there it is. There it is. Finally, we got it. We got our Yahoo. Does this strike a memory of your first relationships? Pulling some heartstrings? And YouTube didn't exist. Facebook didn't exist. Basically, there was no Twitter, no Uber, no Airbnb, no Instagram, no Pinterest, no Snapchat, no Tinder, no fun at all. So all you could do is text message, learn to drive, stay in hotels, make friends, get hobbies, leave the house, or talk to people, and it was terrible. So it's pre-social media. The next period now is just a smaller amount of time, just 10 years, and suddenly we see mobile phones take off, all the cool things you need to be an awesome dude could be done on your phone, and we reach 1.5 billion people on Facebook. Culture becomes completely different. Try staring at your buddy and making a big smile. Look next to you and stare and smile. High five them. And now stare at this.
This is worth every penny!
So media becomes completely different. Now here's the last little note in equality. We see a world where if you look at the most popular images in stock photography and media, you actually start to see equal rights come to play a little bit more. And you'd think that all of these things are equal, but actually it's an accelerated world. And you can use this sort of tactic if you break out what happened in your own industry and your own company to better determine where your world is going. The exercise I do as my final exercise with you and your team would be to figure out how to internalize the pace of change, track what's happening in your market, brainstorm that super future, and then shock yourself into action by using these paces of change and intervals to better realize how quickly the world's accelerating. And that brings me to my final note, which I can't really get into, which is what's now. We've got augmented reality, robotic construction, augmented games, and this one here is a brain-controlled virtual reality video game, so you don't even have to move when you're kayaking. That's where the world's headed. Or a brain-controlled device that stimulates your hypothalamus to cause weight loss. I hope it works. And finally, we've got our phones that can predict which wine we want to drink. I love it. So it's a great time to be alive. But this wraps up my time. And so if you want to know a little bit more about the trends that we have and how to dive deeper into what's impacting your market, I have two people right here. Dylan and Charlie, you want to stand up? It's Charming Charlie, by the way. They're here for the rest of the event. We've got 100 books to hand out for those that are making noise at the tail end of this. If you're on that list, then send us an email or a note, and we'll connect you with the research we're already doing for you. And if not, if you're a brand and you want a free report, we'll get you something in your category. Basically, our reports look like this. If you wanted to know about chocolates and media, then in a day or two, we can turn you around something that might be useful. But with that said, I'll instead give you all my freebies. I want to just say you only have 10 seconds, basically, we'll say 30, to photograph my closing URL. And if you go to this URL, trendhunter.com/secret/media insights, I've got my last book. The first one's half pictures, so you know it's good. It's there all free. I've got 4 of my keynotes for you, our assessment, our 2018 trend report, all free, our patterns of opportunity, and my slides and homework questions from this deck. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, here's my last note for you. You're experiencing history's highest rate of change, disruption, ambition, and opportunity. There's never been a better time to be in media, trying new things, exploring and testing concepts. You have the ability to put out little tiny tests and rapidly get your feedback and push your brands in new levels. But the one thing that's true is now is not the time to preserve. It's the time for action. Now is the time to take risks. Now is the time to push yourself and your teams because nobody else will, because nobody else controls you. So recognize your role in making your team reach higher, stretching their mind, taking those leaps, trying those ideas, making change happen even if it seems hard. You need to break rules, push harder, act sooner, and never give up. Or in my little rules on getting better and faster, you need to be curious if you want to get better and faster. You need to be insatiable if you want to get better and faster. You need to be willing to destroy the egos and things in your companies that slow you down. But as my final little note before we get ready for cocktail hour and our final keynote, be revolutionary. Thank you very much.